Is up, y'all? Welcome back to episode 61 of That's No Moon Pod. Kind of wanted this one to be a Star Wars heavy episode. It's been a while since I kind of just ranted on about Star Wars and just kind of where it's at, what to expect, what I'm hoping for. Um, we got some news recently about the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. As you all know, this movie was announced coming off the heels of the comments made by the director of the Ray movie after she kind of came out and said it's about time that a woman shapes Star Wars or a galaxy far, far away, and that stirred up a bunch of people coming out saying pretty much like, "What are you talking about? We've already had plenty of women shape the galaxy," and that kind of forced Lucasfilm's hand, and that led to them announcing that The Mandalorian and Grogu will become a movie, and it's supposed to come out before the Ray movie now. Um, I remember hearing those comments when she first said them, and right away I knew that it was going to start something, and nothing good, obviously. And sure enough, people were pretty furious about it. Um, I don't necessarily find myself getting furious about anything in related to stuff like this, but I knew it wasn't politically correct or just she shouldn't have said that. Her PR team, whoever, should have been like, "Hey, just stick to the what we can expect from the movie, get people excited. Don't say anything that can, you know, rile up these feathers of this very sensitive fan base." But she still said it, and that kind of just again made everything a little bit more difficult for people to get excited to for what's to come within Star Wars. And recently they said that the Mandalorian and Grogu movie will be shooting in LA, which you could already presume that it's going to be pretty volume heavy. Um, Not too much location shooting, and supposedly the budget of the Mandalorian and Grogu is only going to be around 120-ish million dollars. Um, Skeleton Crew, the Disney Plus show that we're supposed to be getting later this year as well, that's supposed to have a higher budget than the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Skeleton Crew is supposed to be the biggest budget for any Disney Plus show ever so far, which sounds pretty wild considering the fact that, I mean, with Skeleton Crew and The Acolyte, which is also supposed to be coming out this summer, we've hardly gotten any details or any kind of news on any of those shows. Um, there was something that came out on The Acolyte recently saying about what it might possibly be about some kind of deal with twins or some kind of I don't know if it's a love triangle or something, but they're keeping the details on those shows pretty close to the chest, and that's got me a little nervous on what we can expect because Disney Plus doesn't have a very good track record when it comes to these shows. Um, and if they're spending that kind of money for Skeleton Crew and um, not really giving The Mandalorian and Grogu that much of a budget for a feature film, compared to a Disney Plus series. It sounds kind of wonky when you hear it. Uh, Part of the reason I think why it might not be as much of a high budget is one, um, Pedro Pascal has come out and said how he hasn't really been happy recently with the show or his screen time outside of the helmet. And there was a whole lot of drama that kind of leaked out within the past few years of just him not being necessarily happy with all of that. So I think part of the budget being so low might have to do with, I mean, you're not having to pay Pedro Pascal a buttload of money because it's pretty much just going to be his voiceover work, and he's not going to be having too much airtime without the helmet. And by them shooting in LA, not shooting in London or any kind of on location, that might, dwindle down the budget a bit. So the budget of the movie being so low, I think kind of it could be a blessing in disguise because they know that people are going to go watch this movie. And especially if you throw in Grogu in there, and the Mandalorian's already someone that we all know and love. And recently, the Joker 2 budget came out, and that thing's supposed to be over 200 something million, I think. Um, a pretty big budget considering the fact that the first Joker movie was made for hardly anything, and it made plenty and plenty of profit when the first one came out. And I know that Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga's um, their contract, the amount of money that they're getting paid to do the movie is pretty high. So that in itself is going to balloon the budget considerably. Um, but recently, you just see these studios throwing so much money at these movies, um, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're just hoping that they could get a billy out of it. Um, we see that a lot with Jurassic Park, Fast and Furious movies. Um I believe the Gladiator 2 budget is something crazy. I think it's even more than the Joker 2 movie, um, which is pretty insane. And it's crazy to see that these studios are just trying to balloon these budgets, hoping that, again, that they can make a crazy amount of profit off of these. Um, so the budget of the Mandalorian and Grogu, it's not too worrisome for me personally, as of right now, because again, you're not having to pay Pedro crazy amount of money to be showing his face and do full on acting. It's gonna just be a lot of his voiceover work. I'm sure there'll be scenes, or at least a scene, where he gets um, some airtime without the helmet, but the majority of the movie he's gonna be masked up. Um, you're not having to pay someone to voice Grogu or nothing like that either. And the only thing I would say, I guess, is worrisome for me is just the fact that they're shooting in LA, and it's going to be volume heavy, not shooting on as much locations. Um, so it's going to be hella blue screen, green screen, whatever. Uh, that's the only thing that kind of makes me nervous because for a Star Wars movie, I would like them to kind of broaden their horizons, kind of take the Andor approach and actually shoot on some actual locations, make it feel that much more realistic. But I'm optimistic because I mean John Favreau directing the movie. You're not having someone at the helm kind of who already has a shaky track record. Uh, so that alone has me optimistic, but just the fact that they're shooting in LA has me a little worrisome. But the budget to me isn't that big of a deal, considering the fact that, I mean, they probably already had most of the story already written and ready to go for what they wanted to do for the Mandalorian season 4. And instead of just kind of, making it last an 8 episode series, just kind of shrink it down to a 2 hour movie. Uh, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see because, again, right now, just Star Wars is just in a place that's not the best, not a whole lot good to look forward to. Um, One of the things to look forward to Star Wars wise, I think right now, I mean, we just got the first 3 episodes of the Bad Batch season 3 premiered last week, and I've always been a big Bad Batch fan. There's a lot of people that aren't into it, kind of just think it's this or that, but um, getting into the newest 3 episodes, I really like the tone. We're really getting a lot of good scenes with Omega and Crosshair, kind of showing both of their development as characters. Um, as we all know, the crew's pretty much just dwindled down to them now, Hunter and Wrecker. Uh, and then bringing in Palpatine, I think it was a good move to kind of get people invested early on and dropping those 3 episodes right away. Because if you just drop the first episode and then just kind of go one by one, people might, slowly start to fall off early on because the first 2 episodes are really kind of just the setup. Even though the first one, I love the music and kind of just the story that they were trying to tell with Omega and um, them trying to get a certain amount of M count from her blood. And when we come to find out that it's Palpatine who's trying to get all these clones' blood's M count for the project Necromancer, and that's kind of a point in the show to where it's kind of annoying because everything that we've been getting now from Star Wars, it's all kind of trying to figure out a way to fix whatever happened in the sequel trilogies. And to me, I think that just doesn't bode well for the stories that they're trying to tell in the newer Star Wars that we're getting so far. It seems like everything that they're doing now is just trying to fix on what didn't make sense in the sequel trilogies, which is a bummer because instead of just trying to make sense of why is Palpatine even returning in the first place, who Snoke is, and why he even exists, and how he became who he is with all that much power to be able to get Kylo Ren on his side. Um, that just shows you that they had no plan whatsoever with the sequels. They were just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I know there's a lot of people that love the sequel trilogy and they stand by it, which is great. Um, I'm not one of them. I could see the things that clearly don't make any sense. And, when I go back and watch those movies, you could just see that there was no plan. And, they were just kind of hoping to, get people invested by, getting Palpatine back in the picture somehow. Um, there wasn't really too much attention paid to what exactly makes sense going forward. Um, it seemed like, in the Bad Batch season 3, it's all gonna lead up to kind of just, well, how was Palpatine able to clone himself? And you could kind of see the writing on the wall with the whole, um, when Palpatine's in, when he shows up and he wants to see the progress that they made with all these clones, M count. Um, and then just saying Project Necromancer, that right away just shows what they're trying to do. Um, and again, I just wish that they wouldn't have to do all that, because instead of just trying to tell a cool, unique story, they're having to, pick up the pieces that, weren't followed up through with the sequel trilogy. And that just does a disservice to the creators, people that want to tell these original stories with these characters. Um, and I don't get it personally, because, again, I know there's a lot of people that love the sequel trilogies, but, instead of trying to fix the wrongdoings, they're just kind of ruining their, what they could do with all these new projects. Because I'm sure, um, there was some deal with that going on with, obviously, with Grogu. They're trying to, test on him and try to get his M count. Um, and I'm sure that was part of the reason why they threw that part in the movie or in the show, The Mandalorian, just to try to make sense of what was going on in the sequels. Um, and again, I'm loving the Bad Batch so far, even despite all that, um, because at the end of the day, it's the crew, it's Omega, it's Hunter and Wrecker trying to save Omega and just try to get the band back together as much as possible. Um, and to me, that's the best part of Star Wars, when there's like these stakes and there's like a sense of family and togetherness, and these group of people doing whatever it takes to either get back a certain person or to, complete the mission. But it's the togetherness, it's the doing whatever it takes and the hope to, complete the mission at hand. To me, that's when Star Wars is at its best. It has all those emotional elements to it, while still finding some way to add on to the lore and the overall galaxy. That's when Star Wars is at its best, and it's not at its best when it's trying to make sense of, something else's wrongdoings. Um, I'm excited to see where the Bad Batch goes from here. Um, I think they kind of learned, from the past two seasons, the right tone that they're going for. Um, Not relying too much on just certain filler type deals. Even though I saw some people saying that episode 2 was just filler. Um, and I could see their point of view on that, but I still felt like it pushed the story forward with, Hunter and Wrecker just trying to find any type of clues or any kind of lead on that would take them to figure out where Omega is. And seeing Omega grow as a character, because she was locked up in that place with Crosshair for a minute, and you could see just her hair's getting longer, and she's now kind of at this point to where she's not the liability. She's just part of the whole crew now, and she's able to take things in her own hands and figure out these plans and ways to escape and just get out of these scenarios on her own. And it's cool to see that from her character because, she was always just kind of that liability. She was always having to just being that damsel in distress, and seeing Crosshair kind of have um, that thing going on with his hands, and he's kind of slowly losing his ability of what makes him Crosshair, which is just pretty much being a dead shot. Um, I'm sure that'll come into play somehow. Um, I heard something saying that Tech might somehow still be alive, but I hope that's not the case. Um, when these characters are gone and they're supposed to be dead, just keep them that way. Don't do the Palpatine deal to where they're somehow still alive. Takes away that emotional impact that we had from when they're gone. Um, so I'm hoping that's not the case, but I guess we'll see what the episode 4 brings us. Um, Let me know what y'all think because again, it just sucks that these stories that we've been getting with Star Wars always have to kind of just pick up the pieces from the sequel trilogy, um, instead of just kind of making a story that is original and not having to deal with the burden of the sequels or just the story that wasn't well put together. Um, when I watched The Force Awakens, I remember really loving The Force Awakens when it came out, but when you see just where it goes from there, um, it really just kind of makes The Force Awakens, which I think is the best out of the sequel trilogies. It just kind of brings it down a notch, to be honest. Um, and I guess just ranting about the sequels for a bit. Um, I know there's a lot of people that love The Last Jedi. Um, I just can't. I just can't with the whole Luke situation. Um, I remember watching the movie and just kind of feeling just off-putting just by the way Luke was and just the way he carried himself in the movie. I'm all good with the whole, he's this Jedi who's just felt like he's failed in what he set out to do. I like that whole aspect of that. But to me, I was never, um, I was always an Obi-Wan guy. Obi-Wan's always been my favorite Jedi. And I know there's a lot of people that grew up way before me who grew up with the original trilogy, like I did with the prequel trilogy. Even though the original trilogy I grew up on, that's kind of was my starting point in the Star Wars. I used to always rent the OT at Blockbuster whenever I could. A New Hope is still my favorite Star Wars movie to this day. Um, And if I was a kid growing up and Luke Skywalker was kind of like how Obi-Wan is to me, I just could not be on board with just seeing the character that I know and love kind of just end up being this fragile, just kind of wimp at the end of the day. Because when I watch the original trilogy, it still makes me feel like I used to when I was a kid, seeing the character of Luke and where he started off to where he eventually becomes this master Jedi in Return of the Jedi, and seeing his mental toughness on, you know, facing his father and still not turning over to the dark side with so much going on within his mind. Um, I think it's just a detriment to his character, and it's kind of like you're waiting so long. We've all waited so long to see Luke return, Mark Hamill, be Luke Skywalker again, and they kind of just pull the rug up from under us and just kind of do a complete 180 on what we were expecting just for the sake of not giving people what they wanted, which to me doesn't make sense because, again, we waited so long for this character to come back, and you kind of just, instead of giving in to what we've all wanted, you just not give us that just for the sake of that, for the sake of a surprise. And this, to me, it's kind of like seeing, um, if we were waiting for a Batman or a Superman movie, and we're waited so long for this guy to come back, and then Batman finally returns, and he's just this kind of dude who doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to, do anything that his character is embedded on doing, and then he just kind of goes out at the end like whatever. Because I remember when Luke dies, I didn't feel like Luke died, like the impact, the emotional impact. And if you're gonna kill off a character like Luke Skywalker, because Luke Skywalker in the whole mythicism of movies is easily one of the he's one of the top of the line when it comes to that. It's like, again, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Luke Skywalker, these characters that are in these certain universes of movies and lore. Um, you got to treat them with respect. And if you veer off in a direction that just kind of doesn't make sense for the character, um, it just doesn't hit right. And I feel like if you're gonna kill off Luke Skywalker, you gotta make me feel like, wow, like Luke Skywalker is gone. And I mean, Mark Hamill even came out and said that he didn't agree with anything that the character was written to do. And when you got the guy himself, coming out and saying all that, then you know that it wasn't the right choice at the end of the day. And now again, they're just trying to pick up the pieces with all these latest projects, um, and it sucks because instead of all that, we could be getting these cool new original stories that don't have anything to do with the sequels, and they gotta know that. I mean, people are not asking for more sequel trilogy stuff. Like, the less we get of that and the further away that we get of that kind of time period, I think, is the better for Star Wars. Um, they just need to really give us a time period that we haven't seen yet. And I know the Acolyte is supposed to be doing that, even though I think it's only like 100 years before, the Phantom Menace. But even that, you're going in the right direction at least. I just don't understand why they continue to try to, give us these timelines that we've seen so much for so long now, and instead just veering off into a direction that we haven't seen. Like, go way back, go when there's hundreds of Jedi and hundreds of Sith roaming around, and have them kind of have like this giant Sith Jedi type of feud where they're constantly battling and trying to get control over the galaxy. Um, because it just feels like they're throwing anything at the wall and see what sticks. Um, and I don't know exactly where they go from here. Because again, there's not a whole lot to be excited for other than, if you're excited for the Acolyte, which right now, um, I'm interested in seeing what it looks like. Skeleton Crew, again, there's not been a whole lot of news about all that. We'll see if it's any good. Um, Stellan Skarsgård, um, from Andor. He came out and said that he thinks Andor season 2 is supposed to be coming out either at the end of this year or early 2025, which I think is good. Um, Andor, I thought, was one of the better made shows that we've gotten from Disney Plus. Um, I think it goes Mando season 1 and 2, and then Andor season 1. I think those are easily the three best series that we've gotten from Disney Plus, Star Wars show wise. Even though Andor, um, a lot of people say it was boring. Um, I didn't think it was. It's hard for me to say that any Star Wars content is boring, but I think I can't necessarily disagree too much with all that. There was points in the show where I was like, all right, let's kind of wrap this up and let's get back to some Andor stuff. Um, I wasn't a big fan of the whole Cyril storyline with him, and kind of just felt like those scenes were just kind of slowing down the show, to be honest. Um, I was hoping for a little bit more boom boom, um, but I'm not the kind of guy who just needs a whole show of just all that. But I do think that the show was kind of, in terms of Star Wars, a little too slow in moments. I wish that K2SO was in it season one. I know he's supposed to be in season two, but I feel like they could have made a little bit more exciting of a show if they brought him in early and kind of showed us how exactly they met. Um, 'Cause I know in the in one of the comic books, they had the how Andor and K2SO meet, and the story was kind of whatever to where Andor goes on a mission with these twins, and they go on to some kind of rebel base, and um, they kind of turn K2SO to somehow help them escape somehow. So I think they're gonna kind of change up that whole storyline in Andor season two because they clearly don't care about the books or comic books when it comes to these live action shows and movies. I mean, we're supposed to be getting Asajj Ventress in the Bad Batch season three, and she's supposed to be dead. She died in a novel um, that came out a few years ago. So whenever Asajj Ventress pops up in the trailer, people right away are like, "Well, how is she even here in the first place? She's supposed to be dead." Um, and I'm wondering if they're gonna somehow use that whole thing with the M count blood that Palpatine's trying to do, and probably try to bring her back. Um, but then again, she could just be alive somehow, and because again, they don't care about the books, they don't care about the comics, um, and that goes back to what I was saying about these characters being dead. Um, Asajj Ventress coming back, it won't be that big of a deal to me. I mean, seeing her come back, I think will be cool. Um, but Mace Windu, Samuel L. Jackson recently made some comments saying that he wants Mace Windu to come back. He's saying that Mace Windu's still alive. Um, and that just goes back to saying, well, just keep these characters dead. And I love Samuel, I love Mace Windu, but Samuel is like 80 something years old. Unless they bring him back for some kind of flashback or kind of what they did with Anakin and Obi-Wan, I don't see any reason for Mace Windu to be coming back unless it's in a flashback somehow. Because again, I don't want to see an 80 something year old Samuel L. trying to swing a lightsaber because the lightsaber fights that we've been getting in Disney so far have not been up to par to what they once were. Um, that's part of the reason why I think a lot of the whole thing with the Ahsoka 2 didn't land as well either. Um, I don't know what it is. I mean, obviously they're not getting the choreographer that they had in the prequels. And I know it was a different time to where the prequels was supposed to be these Jedi in their prime, and everything was supposed to be more faster, and they were just so much more, um, so much better at lightsaber dueling than what they were in the original trilogy. But I think those lightsaber fights are just one of those things in Star Wars again that just it's part of the lore and it's part of what makes Star Wars what it is. Not saying that there has to be lightsabers in any or in every single Star Wars property, but if you're gonna do it to where it's memorable and to where it's not just, oh, here we go, they're busting out their sabers and they're clashing. Like, make these actors, put in the time and effort to put together some cool choreography with these lightsabers and something that's going to be memorable. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Um, Battlefront 1 and 2 are getting, I don't think it's a full on remaster, but they're getting re released onto all consoles next month. The original Battlefront 1 and 2. Um, I remember playing those games with my brother nonstop. Those games were just always on loop for me when I was a kid. And the fact that they're bringing them back, um, finally, it got people really excited. The trailer alone, um, when they announced that it's coming back, got a lot of views. So you could tell that there's this big fan base that is really excited for the games to be re-released. Um, Online play, I think they're still going to have the campaign. Hoping for Galactic Conquest, the whole heroes versus villains again. Um, so that's one thing to for sure to be looking forward to when it comes to Star Wars is just the re-release of that game because I'm for sure going to be getting it. I'm gonna be playing it. I'm gonna be hopping on stream. Um, Follow me on Twitch, y'all, at admiremymoonsault. Uh, I'm still posting comic books on my Snapchat and IG. All the links will be down below in the description. Um, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what y'all feel about what's been going on with Star Wars and Lucasfilm. Because right now, um, things still aren't looking too good. Um, but I think there's always still hope. Um, there always will be when it comes to these things. Um, just let me know what y'all think. But until next week, y'all stay safe, and I'll catch y'all on the flip. Peace.